Hello, everybody. Welcome to Bill David's Bogus Hangout. I'm going to have our guests introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about them. Zara, would you like to start?
Hi, I'm Zara Altair, and I write for the web.
Steve
Gritzer, Steam Driven Media, and I do the black hat stuff for people who claim to be white hats.
Terry.
Terry van Horne, SEO pros.
Doc?
I try.
Doc Sheldon of Intrinsic Value SEO, and I'm one of those guys that hires Steve on the down low.
And I'm Bill Slosky of SEO by the Sea. I'm the Director of SEO Research for Go Fish Digital, and we try to avoid the black hat stuff. So we're talking about vaccines, and we haven't approached regime, the transition period in the U.S. government. It's been a topic. The U.S. government's been a topic of many of our recent hangouts, but hopefully it won't be too much today or in the future.
Sure.
We can hope, right?
Yeah, we'll go with that, Bill.
So we can maybe focus upon Google and SEO. And I hear there've been a lot of local search Google suspensions.
Yes.
Is that new?
It's not new, but they're being more proactive, and they're banning people instantly the moment they sign up, which means they have access to more data than they had in the past. What I found more interesting on that similar topic is we've always seen the black hat groups that go around trying to get people bounced or whatever. Well, there's now more than one white hat group that is actively going out and looking for fake GMB local listings, rank and rent type sites and things like that. And then they're reporting them to Google. And of course, now the rank and rent guys are throwing a fit that that's not fair. That's my source of income. It's like, well, yeah, but you don't even have a business here. And you're taking, you're adding, you're rent seeking, which is a bad thing, on people who are legitimately trying to earn a living. So yeah, I find the whole thing entertaining as hell when the white hats complain that the white hats are fighting back.
At one point in time, there was a patent from Google that came out that said they would look at business registrations for businesses that would try to be verified. But I've never seen Google ask for that type of information. I've seen some others that request you fax them your articles of incorporation, but not Google.
Right.
One of the things that public web though.
One of the things that I've been seeing in a lot of GMB applications is, and this happened to a client of mine where we started setting up the GMB and things got delayed and we didn't finish and all that other stuff. And when it came time to finish, I hadn't put any pictures up yet, and they rejected it. So I went ahead and the first thing I did was throw in a couple of pictures of the outside of the building, hit the resubmit button, and it was approved instantly.
Really?
Yeah.
They like pictures of signs with business addresses on them, don't they?
Yes, they do. And and that's the whole point of the Google My Business and the local pack is to drive you to local businesses, not some guy sitting in his mom's basement selling leads.
The other thing that I've noticed here, that I've heard from a lot of people, that it seems that they're not just looking at it on a business by business basis, but if they find somebody who is apparently fraudulently promoting one, then they look at all the properties he may be tied to.
Yeah, they're all spammers.
And
they do the same thing every time. They aren't even inventive. They make it too easy. Sorry, Doc.
There are legitimate businesses signing up for Google My Business, though.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I agree completely. There are plenty of legitimate businesses, and I don't even really have a huge problem with the guys selling leads. I just find it hysterical that with some of the crap they pull to rank so they can sell leads to people who can't rank. When people who actively compete against them, they throw a fit, and it's like, well, wait a minute, you don't like competition against what you do. It's just funny.
I think that that's new for them to just throw everybody out that, suspend everybody that a guy is managing.
But
Well, I
they,
think it
what-
makes, as a deterrent, I think it makes sense from Google's standpoint, because if you've got 20 clients, you're now going to be a little bit more careful about not jeopardizing the other 19 just because you're doing a little bit of shady stuff for that number 20.
Yeah, they're all one-trick ponies. They do the same thing for every client. Seen it so many times. You read their blogs; they do the
A lot of
same
them.
thing for
A lot of
every
them do, yeah,
client.
but I'm just saying, I think it may be intended as a little bit more of a stronger deterrent on Google's part to make people think about this before they do it. Because even if you were doing it for your own site only, now you could be jeopardizing your clients.
well, and Facebook has a long and glorious history of doing that with Facebook ads.
Yep.
If you're associated with an account that does something a little bit against their terms, they will go ahead and not only take out you, your client, and then all of your other clients as a preemptive measure. And I've seen guys who've lost entire agencies over that because they didn't pull themselves off of a client's account, and then the client went and did something on their own or hired somebody else, and because of that association, they got screwed. So I'm personally very proactive about when I lose a client, I get off of all their stuff
Yeah,
because I will be associated with it.
yeah. First thing I do is get out of Google It used to be really hard to drop webmaster tools. They made it a lot easier now.
Yeah.
But GA, same thing. I don't want to see. I don't want to look at other people's statistics for any reason. I had someone who was doing that to me.
So local search may also show additional information in the Google My Business information for businesses, like year that a business has been incorporated since,
Yeah.
how long they've been in business.
And on the internet, that's a big deal because, not all of us tell the truth about how long we've been actually doing this. Fake it till you make it it's not a statement that,
It's better to ask forgiveness and permission. It's
Same thing.
fake it till you make it. It's the same type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's true.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of ways, that's not that hard to do with this kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it's not every business that you can show on Instagram that you've been to the first location of. I went to the first Starbucks in Seattle, or the Starbucks that's on the street that the first Starbucks was on. The original one, I don't think is there anymore.
Well, that's also, Bill, correct? That's information. How many years a business has been in business. That's easily verified in public records, correct? All that stuff's on the web.
Unless, not necessarily, because we have a lot of instances down here where if you're a sole proprietor making under a certain amount of money per year, you don't even have to file for a business license.
Same
You just
here.
you have to just pay an annual
Right.
County fee or whatever.
Minimum tax, yeah.
So
it varies state by state a lot
Yeah.
of times.
Yeah, yeah.
And even county by county in some states, like Texas, for instance.
In California, if you're doing business, you're supposed to apply for business license.
See, here it's more about the taxes because we have a tax that gets taxed. Everything you buy is taxed, which is, we're not worried about passing out lots of money for the COVID. They'll just add 5% to that tax down the road. They just took 2% off, so they're only charging us 3% more. I don't mind. They pay me well every month, so I'm not going to complain.
Yeah.
I know here it's like there's a state business license, which they don't call a business license. I've forgotten what they call it. It's some weird name. And then if you live within within the city, town, whatever, then you need to get a license from that particular municipality as well.
Yeah, we call them vendor's license.
And there's some counties that charge taxes too.
Right.
And sometimes they're referred to as registration fees as opposed to taxes.
That's what ours is. Just a registration fee. Pay it once. I think about every 5 years you have to renew, but I've never renewed one and nothing happens.
I told you what happened to my father's corporation.
Right.
He incorporated the name he chose, a guy in New York. My father was in New Jersey. A guy in New York incorporated under the same name in New York and decided he didn't want to continue running his business, so he closed it. He sent a certificate of dissolution, but instead of sending it to New York, he sent it to New Jersey, where my father was at. So New Jersey dissolved my father's company. Didn't tell my father. And
You'd think
that
that an agency like that would check a registration number or a license number or tax number, something, no?
he put his New York identification number for his corporation on the certificate of dissolution. And the New Jersey Division of Corporations ignored it.
Just looked at the name and nothing else.
Nothing else.
I have an old friend years ago. He contracted a real rare form of cancer based on his time in the military. Yeah. And the survival rate for this stuff, he got it was, approaching zero. But he survived.
Yeah.
And like 6 months after his doctor released him, the doctor called the house and asked for his wife, and he was confused. And the doctor's talking to the wife and expressing his condolences because he got a notice from the state that Larry had died. And she's like, but Larry's standing right here. And apparently some button pusher in San Diego saw the type of cancer he had and that they were still paying out his retirement benefits. And since nobody survives that type of cancer, she pushed the button and marked him deceased. So then he spent 2 months getting everything turned back on, and 6 months later they killed him again.
Oh, no.
Jesus.
Oh, no.
This went on.
Bureaucracy.
Yeah, the bureaucracy killed him 3 different times. The last time he made the comment that since he was already dead, that he could not be punished for coming down there and extracting her spine through her throat. So
could have voted 3 times in Michigan.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's always entertaining to hear the stories of weirdness with bureaucracies being super efficient at what they do.
That reminds me of a story. When I was in the Navy, I had a chief electrician's mate I worked with, and he got to his home. He got a letter mailed that he had been nominated for the position to sit on some selection board of flag officers. Okay, I mean these are all going to be above captain. They're all going to be like rear admiral and above, and he'd been nominated to sit on this board and want to know if he would accept the nomination. He wrote back that hell yes. He was showing it to everybody aboard the ship, and the XO got a hold of it. He says, I got a feeling his name was Paul. I forget his last name, Paul something. He says, I got a feeling there may be another Paul so and so somewhere in our Navy who should have gotten this invitation. It was funny.
Well, there was another story loosely related to tech that the director of security for Apple, for physical security, is being investigated for bribery with the local sheriff up there to get his concealed carry permit. And part of the discussion, this happens at a lot of places where if the sheriff, as a fundraiser says, I can fast track your concealed carry permit for a donation to kind of thing. And this happens everywhere all the time. Yep. And I thought it was the funniest thing that I saw in the whole discussion was somebody made the comment. It's like, well, how do you react to something like this? What do you do? And somebody goes, well, you just simply don't pay the bribe. And it's like, obviously you've never dealt with a local sheriff who you refuse to bribe. It's very entertaining.
Yep.
I have a relative who made the mistake of outbidding a police chief who was retiring at a auto auction. All the confiscated vehicles. Well, this retiring chief wanted a certain vehicle, so nobody was bidding on it, and so it was going to go really, really, really cheap. Well, then my relative decided, well, I'm going to go ahead and bid on this too because it's going so cheap. That turned out very poorly for him. He wound up getting pulled over all the time. So, yeah, just not paying the bribe after the sheriff comes out and asks for one is usually not an option. But apparently somebody at Apple on their ethics committee is also involved in the investigation. It's like, so somebody in charge of ethics at Apple was involved in bribing a local law enforcement officer.
So we got life lessons today in addition to SEO. Careful how you bribe your local sheriff.
That's it.
That's it.
So we had good news reported at SEO Roundtable that if somebody scrapes your content and publishes it on a site, it won't cause your own content to rank lower. I guess that's if the other content gets
I would
ranked.
have even considered asking, really.
Yeah.
Well, consider the person who's stealing your content doesn't spend any time actually writing the content. So he's got lots of time to build links. And that's usually how they're outranking them. So to say that it was the quality of the other site, in my opinion, was not true. It was very assumptive and not real news. The real news is the other guys are probably spamming that hell out of everything. Because those kind of sites only get there one way. That's been my experience. I don't know. Steve, you have an opinion?
Back in the old days when we used to do RSS feeds,
Yeah.
and people used to build websites out of other people's feeds. And people would throw a fit, such and such site stole my feed and now they outrank me. So we got one of the more popular RSS feed generation tools and had it insert links back to our content. So anything they scraped automatically linked back to the source. And, we added the text, original source here with a link and all that fun stuff. And then if they wanted to go ahead and swipe it, they could swipe it to their heart's content.
There's at least one plugin that says this post was originally posted at such and such a site and links back to it.
Yep.
And I've got that on my site.
Yeah, that's syndication. That's different.
Yeah.
What they're talking about is a lot different.
Most of the sites I've seen that scrape my content do it through my RSS feed.
Yep. It's real simple. That's why if you're smart, you don't put that information out there. I remove it from the template.
There's a way to publish the RSS feed so that it's only a summary instead of the full feed,
Yeah.
instead of the full post.
Well, I've always done summary, but I hide it too. Like, too easy. You know how easy that is? There's like almost any program. For instance, every podcast that I have distributed, I distribute it using the RSS feed. And the other people just have to subscribe to the feed and suck it in and good to go. There's lots of free plugins to do that as well. I used to populate my Tumblr the same way, hook up 4 or 5 feeds to it.
Are you still on Tumblr?
I got an account, but I haven't been there in like probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, same for me. I was just curious.
Yeah, mine.
I
I
just do
haven't been to
overrun
mine for
requirement.
I probably haven't been to mine for 5 years, but it posts every day to Twitter. Sometimes I share things that I would not have wanted to share, to tell you the truth.
That's why I basically got out of there. Too much junk coming down there.
Yep.
Quit using it.
So I'm writing about a patent right now that talks about Google showing information in carousels that are top stories, and some of the things they show are things like quotes and opinions. And places like the New York Times have been getting upset that they're showing some of those quotes.
So you think they're doing it already, Bill?
I think they're doing it already. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was interested in that. The way they're kind of base it on a web story and then pull in that other information. Because I'm not sure the exact number, but a web story is to be very, very short and concise, right?
Yeah, the patent doesn't say anything about stories. It says they're analyzing articles to identify opinions from them. So they're trying to provide more diversity in top stories by showing some that are opinion-based and that cover diverse opinions.
Okay, so with the opinions, did they show the opinion alongside of the top news story, or do they just show the opinion?
They would show the opinion in a carousel of its own.
Oh, I see. Okay.
As one of your top news stories choices. Usually they show you 3 top stories and then show you a link underneath those to more stories.
Right. The examples, though, that they were finding were using AMP pages as the like a story, and then the other three off of it, right? With the ellipses.
I don't know, because last year supposedly they stopped limiting top stories to AMP stories. They added more diversity. They said you don't need to be an AMP story to be a top story.
So we're talking about the featured snippets with data overlay or something else?
We're talking about a carousel with news stories in it. So they're not featured snippets. They're little boxes with pictures and text.
Okay.
They don't necessarily need to have the pictures. A lot of news stories have pictures.
Right. I think maybe that's why web story is a picture with a very short caption, right?
Yeah, but a web story isn't a top story.
Okay.
A web story is supposedly a different presentation format completely. It's a way of telling a story with multiple pictures and text.
So
Right.
I'm not sure how I feel about opinions being there with the story, because
They're showing some.
I get what they're doing.
They're showing some stories, and they're showing some opinion articles, like op-ed type things.
Oh, op-ed articles. Okay, I thought. All right. Thank you.
Right. So somebody writes into the local newspaper, I hate this because it's no fun. It costs money, and I have no time for it. That's not bad. It's often they're written by people other than journalists.
I understand, and they're often those people other than journalists are very fired up about whatever the topic is. So that's why I was like,
Are they possibly have an economic motivation?
right, exactly. There's that too. So that's why I'm like, all right, so Google is saying, well, we're doing this, to show how we welcome diversity of thought.
Right. And some of the newspapers are giving them or critiquing that. They're giving feedback saying we don't like you doing this.
Yeah, I can understand that, because
Well,
pieces
if the newspapers don't like it, they should stop including op-eds in their papers.
Well, they were more complaining about the captions underneath those pictures. They thought they were taken out of context, and when you lose the context, it loses its meaning.
And I can understand their complaint in that regard, but as a writer, to me, that says I got to be a little bit more careful how I present my article, so that there's nothing there they can take out of context.
Well, here's what I thought was weird about it, Doc, was they said, well, ours work because it's in the context of the whole story. It's in the newspaper. But you get the same thing when you look at a SERP. You see the other stuff around it. And they weren't giving Google the same credit, basically. They were saying, well, it's all right for us to do it, but not you, because we can get better context. Well, I disagree. You agree, Bill, or did I get it wrong?
I don't know. I'm just thinking back to Google recently saying they're going to pay newspapers for publishing their stuff. Why would journalists get upset if the search engine is going to pay them to provide leads to their stories?
Well, because they can write a story about it and make money that way. If there is no news, you make news. That's their business.
There's always news to write about.
I think so. If you're willing to work for
You
it.
don't need to make it up.
Yeah, but
I mean, get a job in DC if you want to make stuff
you
up.
want to make stuff up.
There you go.
Right,
Yeah, be a campaign manager. That'll do it.
right. Or press secretary.
Well, actually, I was watching CNN because all the, for Canadians, it's the second biggest sport. Politica, but American politics is watched about as much as hockey. So I was watching CNN and they were reporting on the lockdown here in Toronto. Apparently, we had 1,500 deaths here in one day. Well, that was totally wrong. It was 1,500 cases that day. We've only had 11,000 deaths in the whole province since last March. So I kind of get where the fake news comes from. It's poor reporting. They don't work for an article. Like journalists were journalists back in the day. These days they want everything spoon-fed to them. The questions they ask at news conferences are ridiculous. Like, geez, it's all on the web. All you have to do is go and look and you can get the real data and not count on these guys to, tell you what they feel like. That's just my opinion, I guess. Sorry, I strayed a bit there, Bill.
So I dislike the press secretaries who will tell you with a straight face blatant lies.
Yes.
And
Well, unfortunately, the last administration, to get in, you had to be a pathological liar.
As a press secretary, that was a requirement. Yes.
Yeah, I think so. Same for the president, pathological liar.
Yeah. With a straight face.
That's why it's pathological.
I'd just like to go on record here saying, Bill, that this time it was not me that took us down the political path.
I was
full
just so
disclosure.
I was just so amused by the attorneys of that.
I can tell you, looking at from someone, outside of America,
Yeah,
I kept thinking to myself, well, this is like a banana republic. I expect to see stuff like this in Venezuela, not in the United States. And it's not even just the.
You probably have too, Bill. I have seen cases brought to a judge where he basically flayed the DA, just absolutely gutted him in front of the entire courtroom for a poorly prepped case or for a poor interpretation of the statute, and rip him a new one in front of God and everybody. And I would like to think that happened a few times on some of these challenges over the last couple of weeks. But
that happened in Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
Pennsylvania did that. I would love to have been a birdie in the courtroom hearing that.
Yeah, I think he was the judge where they said, "Oh, this just ain't gonna fly." No judge is gonna do his, waste his integrity.
If they did the research, they would have seen, number one, he was appointed by Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Number two, he was a Republican. Number three, he was a member of the Federalist Society.
Ah.
So he was their target audience. He was their teammate. He was their guy. And he said, look, if you had bothered to do your research and given me a case that had some facts behind it, I would have bent over backwards to help you.
A little bit of merit. Yeah, would have been nice, eh?
But you gave me nothing.
I didn't realize he was in the Federalist Society too. God.
Yeah.
I didn't either. Wow.
I mean, they were preaching to the choir. And even the judge said, no, get out of here. You're losers.
No judge is going to waste his integrity on.
Yeah.
I think that's what they were hoping, that a judge would just politicize it and,
they had expectations that if they brought a case to a federal court, and could appeal it automatically to the next higher level court, and that would automatically get appealed to the Supreme Court, where the person they just sat on the Supreme Court was likely going to vote for them. But the judge said, look, this is the 6th most populated state in the country, with the 6th most votes of any state. I'm not going to invalidate all those votes just because some
Shyster. Shyster is the word you're looking for, Bill.
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Well, the last press conference was talking about the Venezuelan stuff. And
Right. She was too crazy for the Trump legal team.
Too Trump, even when you're too crazy even for them, you are certifiable.
You're way out there.
We're talking some wraparound sweater sleeves here, buddy.
But the facts were so wrong. I mean, Chavez has been dead for
7 years. So he has no need or motivation to see Joe Biden elected president.
Or to even form that company or do the things that she said he did.
Right.
Maybe they meant to attribute that to Cesar Chavez. He's only been dead for 29 years.
Well, she was a well-known and well-respected federal prosecutor.
Well,
and I'm thinking
undeserved respect then.
I mean, what kind of drugs? What kind of pills? What kind of alcohol is she on?
Well, you got to wonder how high the bar is for their standards if she's at the top.
She's a corporate litigator.
Oh,
she represents corporations all the time.
Then that rung is a lot lower.
She supposedly has a tremendous reputation for doing well. I have no idea where the reputation came from.
Anybody can go into Washington and throw money around and get what they want. That's not a big feat.
And the corporate legal system is radically different from the civil or criminal systems. I mean, the sort of behavior that is standard and acceptable and works are very, very different. Corporate is probably shouldn't even be considered part of the legal system.
Putting that wouldn't even fly in corporate law.
Moving right along.
So
I'm just glad it wasn't me.
This new passage indexing isn't supposed to show up until December or January. But there's been some discussion. Martin Splitt has talked about some of it, and he said, okay, an example is sometimes you have pages that are very focused on narrow subjects, like pages about a specific type of tomato. And sometimes you have pages that are much wider in scope, like about all vegetables. And you have sections of those pages about specific types of tomatoes. So when Google indexes or ranks content based on those pages, it will look now, presently, and say, okay, here's the pages that are focused specifically upon those types of tomatoes. Let's find an answer on those pages. It'll ignore the pages that have a much wider range of topics and may have some passages that are about that specific type of tomato. And the new indexing or passage ranking will rank content from the wider pages that maybe cover lots of topics that have the specific information that you want. So that's supposed to be the benefit of passage ranking. It'll look at some of those pages where it might not have looked in the past.
Right. Would that
So-
be?
I don't think, my understanding is
So there's a misunderstanding here, and people are using the word dilution of content to describe the wider ranked pages, the wider scoped pages that have more content, and they're calling those diluted pages when they're not diluted. They just cover more content, and they may have content worth indexing, worth returning for a query, but because Google looks at the scope of the page and it's wider, it's not choosing those at present. Google's not saying that you should stop having those wider pages. It's just saying we're going to make sure that information gets returned in search results. So it's not saying dilute the content on your pages or avoid diluting content on your pages. That's SEO is saying that.
So when do we start the pool for the first guru that says all the content on one page is the best way to rank?
I would say that at least one guy will come out with the definitive guide to passage ranking
yeah,
sometime soon, because he has a definitive guide to other bullshit.
right,
Yeah.
right.
We're talking about you, Neil.
No, not Neil. He
okay.
writes with them, so
Personally, I think this passage ranking is going to be a very positive thing. I think it's going to have a great effect for site owners and for users, because it's entirely possible that broad scope page has a better excerpt on that narrow topic than some other page that is totally dedicated to that topic.
Yep.
Look, and it's a passage. They're only looking for a few lines, right? Like
Right.
a featured snippet.
Right.
So it's a lot easier. And also, you can also say that those pages probably aren't ranking for the query in which that passage is being put into.
Yep.
Right? Which
Probably not.
that's going to search, because that's the only way you can surface more answers, right, to questions, is to remove the ranking part from it. Just go by the straight relevance of the passage. And that's why structure to the pages is more important, because it's easier to pull those passages if your pages have proper HTML structure in its heading.
Well, the other thing that I think is very encouraging is the fact now, if the search engine is going to look at a passage of a couple of lines and determine its relevance to the query, now all of a sudden things like the site's overall rankings, the links coming into that page, even the EAT, all of these things will be less relevant to that passage ranking process. Which, to me, ideal. Let's find relevance. Let's make that the primary factor.
But should have been anyways.
Some things will still have a lot of importance, like having headings.
Oh, sure.
And if you don't
Define
have
the passage.
if you don't have headings that break that wider page down into those different topics, that's where you're failing, where you have poor structure.
Yeah. And Bill and Martin's. Well, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry.
Yeah, it's just like I'm agreeing. It's like before anybody started talking about passages, having that kind of structure on your page
was critical.
Was important, and so it's not like it's a new way to do something. It's like just make sure that you're doing what you're doing well, you know.
If you're doing it right to begin with, you got no problem. You're probably going to do better. But if you weren't doing it right,
like what happened with
it's going to be a lot harder.
It's like what happened with Rank Brain, you know, and everybody had the definitive answer to Rank Brain stuff.
Yeah. the last point I wanted to make, Bill, is in reading Martin's answer, right?
Yeah.
I also took from it that these passages will only be used when there isn't enough of that narrow topic stuff to get the amount of information into the SERP that they want. So passages are like a backfill.
Yep.
That's what I took from Martin's answer.
That was my sense as well.
I put you on the spot.
No. There's a patent that came out from Matt Cutts and Hal Varian, who was the head economics person at Google, and they talked about when there were queries with inadequate content, and sometimes they would show, and now they still show. Sometimes there's not much content. There's not much response to this query. And they'll head the results with that statement. There's not much here on that topic.
Oh yeah, we don't have much on that topic type deal. Yeah.
Yeah. And that fill-in sort of supports that. Using passages saying, hey, there aren't too many pages themselves specifically about that topic, but there are passages that are about that topic.
Right.
I could see them doing that. So this patent from Cutts and Halvarian said one thing we could do would be to inform content creators that there were topics that there wasn't much content on, so they could add more.
And that's what the notice is about. Hey, we need more stuff here.
It reminded me of Naver, the search engine from South Korea, which uses a lot of user-generated content. And it would be sort of like Google getting more into the user-generated content business by saying, here's some topics we need you to write about.
Search King did that back in the day. That's way back. That goes a long ways back.
Was that their business model before they started selling links on PageRank sites?
Yeah, that's what he was doing before that. That's exactly what he was doing before he did that. Yeah. In fact, that was the site he did that on.
So that was the advanced business model. Okay.
Yeah. Selling PageRank was the advanced model.
It's a shame.
Well, if you make something monetizable, someone's gonna monetize it. It's just gonna happen. That's the way capitalism works.
So this, what Martin said about passage ranking and inadequate content, that's the differentiation between passage indexing and featured snippets?
Seemed to be what he was saying, yes.
But because they haven't actually further developed that and won't until December or January, the blog post they had about it showed a featured snippet instead of showing a example for passage ranking.
Could be. That was the easy example, so they used that. And it just happened to be a featured snippet, too. That's what I'm thinking might have happened. Because as we discussed, the way that they kind of rank those and the way they rank answers is very close to what they're doing with passages also.
Well, okay, so the where the link to a page goes to a yellow highlighted passage of text. Is that passage ranking? Have you seen results like that? where they link
Not
to
sure, yeah.
text. Yeah, I've seen a few like that.
I saw that, I think, once when it was anchor text was used, like
Yeah.
the link to anchored text, like at the top of the page to further down the page.
There's an add-on to the URL, and it's something like hash mark text, and then what the text is, and then it ends with text again, another then hash mark, and it causes the text that's shown in the URL to be highlighted on the page.
So that's hacking something that's built into a browser, probably.
And maybe a Chrome browser that was doing that on. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But the link was in Google search results.
Oh, the highlighted part was in the Google.
The highlighted part was in Google search results. It was linked to that way with the text and the hash mark and so on.
Mhm.
So that may be the difference between a featured snippet and a passage, index passage. The index passage remains on the page. It's highlighted in yellow.
It's going to be interesting to see how they display passages on the page.
Yeah.
I won't be surprised if they replace what's called an answer box now with just plain passages, not put out like that.
Well, the answer box is a featured snippet now.
Right. But I'm saying you could do that with passages as well in a lot of cases, right?
At which point they'd be indistinguishable from featured snippets.
Right.
Yes. I think that's the way it's going to end up.
So a ranked passage is a featured snippet.
I think so.
So if they didn't tell us that they were doing passage ranking, we would never know the difference anyway.
You would never know the
Well,
difference.
no, we might not ever know the difference between a passage and a featured snippet and then question box.
Because there's nothing that says, well, you just mentioned highlighting, but there's nothing that says this is the beginning of this passage and this is the end of this passage. I mean, the way I understand it is that the search is looking for the most specific, clear answer, and it just so happens that this particular passage on a page is the most specific, clear answer, as opposed to a web page about this subject.
So the difference I'm seeing between ranked passages and featured snippets is that a featured snippet will sometimes be structured data,
Right.
like a table, or just a salva table with a simple answer, like the distance from the Earth to the moon is this many miles, or George Washington was born on this date, and they're just showing a simple answer, or they're showing the roster for the New York Jets is this table. So they're showing either structured data or unstructured data. Unstructured data would be a passage.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a potential difference between the featured snippet and the ranked passage. The ranked passage is unstructured data.
Or won't need any structure. They'll just pull it out of the page.
Right.
Which is basically what they do for meta descriptions now. In a lot of cases.
Right, they skip whatever it is. It's their choice.
The snippet that's not a meta description is just content from the page.
You know, that's an interesting point you bring up, Terry, because I have noticed over the last 2 or 3 weeks I'm seeing a lot more meta description, search results that I've been checking, and it's not the meta description in the source code. They seem to be picking and choosing what they want to put in there in the SERP a lot more than they were 3 or 4 months ago.
But how often does the query term that you searched for appear in the meta description if the meta description
Right.
doesn't show?
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize if you don't have that match in your meta description, they aren't going to show it for any reason. Then
Yeah.
that's got to have the match exactly.
Yeah, I have not been, I didn't do any kind of structured testing. I tend to look at the source code a lot of times of the page when I follow through from the SERP, and I'm just seeing more instances where Google is not using the meta description that was stated. But I haven't looked to see why.
Right. Sometimes when you do a search with more than 2 words or with 2 words or more, and the 2 words are in the meta description, but they're not adjacent to each other, the meta description will still show.
Mm-hmm.
If they think that was better than anything they could pull out of the page themselves.
I'm not sure how much thought actually goes into it.
Okay.
Because, at a billion searches a day, you don't have too much hand-holding of the algorithm.
Yeah.
Right. Especially the meta description, because they don't use it for much. No, ranking wise, anyways.
It's supposed to be a representation of what's on the page.
Yeah.
It's supposed to give you an idea of what the page is about.
Right. So maybe if you do have partial match, but it is a good description of what the page is about, they still use it. Could be the relevance of the metadata or the meta description compared to what they can pull out of the page, right? Or what you have there.
I've seen an awful lot of search results that used the meta description, even though it did not represent what the page was about at all.
And
So
sometimes,
like for instance, one I just spotted yesterday was actually a contact us page on the site. It had a very short paragraph, then it had the form. They had a meta description talking about how wonderful their agency was at providing this service for this type of client. Zero mention of contact, zero mention of form.
But that's not something the search engine is doing. That's something the person who wrote the meta description is doing.
But the search engine did decide to use the stated meta description rather than pull something out of that 2-paragraph introductory text.
Because there's nothing to pull out of that.
Well, there was actually more that was relevant to the page being a contact us page than the meta description, which had no relevance whatsoever to contact. That's my point. So I don't like Bill says, at a billion searches a day, there's not a lot of hand holding. I don't know that really, if there's any thought process goes into it, it's pretty flighty.
So I have a question about the example that you used. Was that a website where the meta description on the various pages always said the same thing? Like if you went to another, because that just sounds like some kind of generic meta description.
That's on every page.
It wasn't the same on every page by any means.
Okay.
It was promotional. It was basically just an agency promotional statement on several of the pages, but they were all unique. But a lot of them focused on a particular service or a particular product, and this one was just talking about the wonderfulness of their agency. Okay, but I don't know. It just, to me, it just jumped out at me as, what the hell?
We're cool.
Why would this meta description show on a contact page? So I went and I looked and did not find an answer to that.
Sometimes people write stuff, they have no idea why they're adding it.
Mm-hmm. There's a blank. I better fill it with something.
I'm supposed to have a meta description here. Let me write one. Which I write. I'll write anything.
Ooh, look at this. It's
Our
asking me for
agency
meta
is really
keywords.
It's also a way to make sure that your contact page doesn't rank. And I know more than a few companies that would want that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's it for our time today.
Oh my gosh, that went fast.
That's what she said. Oh, wait, she did.
That
Wait.
was fast.
So thank you all for joining us, and have a
Thanks,
good week.
everyone.
And take care now. Allowed to wave.
Or blow a kiss.